Right now, over the open waters of the Western Pacific, near a tiny speck of an island most people have never heard of, one of the most powerful storms on the entire planet this year is exploding to life. In a matter of days, it went from a disorganized tropical storm to a screaming, symmetrical monster with a razor-sharp eye, one of the fastest, most violent intensification bursts forecasters have witnessed in years. Its winds are now howling at Category 5 strength, the very top of the scale, and the official forecast says it isn't even finished. It may still be climbing toward becoming the single strongest storm on Earth in all of 2026. Its name is Dolphin, and while it's spinning over open ocean at this moment, forecasters are already watching its projected path with growing concern, because the long-range tracks are pointing it toward Japan. This is a genuinely major, actively developing situation. So today, we're breaking down everything we actually know so far. What it is, how it blew up this fast, the records it's chasing, where it might be headed, and who needs to be paying attention right now. Just the confirmed facts and the honest forecast. No guessing dressed up as certainty, no hype for the sake of hype. This storm is dramatic enough on its own, but before we dive in, do me one quick favor, because it genuinely helps this channel more than you know. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. And if you're anywhere in the Western Pacific, in Japan, or in the region this storm could eventually affect, sound off in the comments so people can see who's in the potential path. I read these, and it matters. And if you want to stay on top of this storm as it develops, because a situation like this can change fast, sometimes within hours, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, it takes 1 second, and it means you'll get every update as we learn more. A thumbs up also helps enormously, pushing this out to more people in the region who need to see it. All right, here's what we know. Let's start with the basics, the confirmed facts about what this storm actually is before we get into the drama. Dolphin is the 13th named storm of the 2026 Western Pacific typhoon season, and it is a big one. It is the third system this season to reach super typhoon strength, following the destructive typhoons that already tore through this region earlier in the year. Its name, fittingly, was contributed by Hong Kong, and it simply means dolphin, which feels almost gentle, almost ironic for a storm this ferocious. Right now, it is positioned out in the open Pacific, churning in the vicinity of Wake Island, a remote, low-lying U.S. atoll far from any major population center, and it has been tracking generally west-northwest, steered along the southwestern edge of a large area of high pressure, sitting over the northern part of the Pacific Basin. That high-pressure ridge is essentially acting like a wall, guiding Dolphin along its rim like a marble rolling around the edge of a bowl. As for its strength, here is the current picture from the forecasters, tracking it around the clock. As of the latest advisories, Dolphin is a violent super typhoon with maximum sustained winds around 160 miles per hour, and gusts pushing near 195. Now, to put that into perspective, the threshold for a Category 5, the very top of the scale, the level reserved for the most catastrophic storms, is 157 miles per hour. So Dolphin has climbed right into Category 5 territory. It is there. And here is the part that really makes forecasters sit up straight. They do not believe it is finished. The U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center is forecasting Dolphin to strengthen even further, potentially peaking with winds around 190 miles per hour, roughly 305 kilometers per hour, as it reaches its most intense phase. If that forecast verifies, Dolphin would not merely be a Category 5. It would be a high-end, top-of-the-scale Category 5, and the strongest storm anywhere on planet Earth so far this year. Now, before we go further, let me quickly explain why these numbers matter so much, because a lot of people see a wind speed, and it's just an abstract figure to them. The scale we use to categorize these storms is not linear. It does not climb in even steps. The destructive potential of the wind rises dramatically as you move up the categories. The difference between a Category 3 and a Category 5 is not a bit worse. It is the difference between serious damage and near total devastation. As wind speed increases, the force it exerts on everything it hits, buildings, trees, power lines, vehicles, climbs far faster than the wind speed number alone would suggest. Doubling the wind speed roughly quadruples the force. So when a storm reaches Category 5, you are talking about winds capable of stripping the walls off well-built homes, snapping mature trees like matchsticks, and turning loose objects into deadly projectiles. That is the class of storm Dolphin has entered. This is not a routine typhoon. This is the top tier. So how did it explode this fast? Because that is the word everyone is using. Exploded. And I promise you, it is not an exaggeration. This is a phenomenon called rapid intensification, and Dolphin has been a textbook, almost frightening example of it. Rapid intensification is officially defined as a storm's winds increasing by a large margin in a short window of time, and Dolphin blew right through that threshold. In fact, forecasters noted that at one point, Dolphin was intensifying faster than any tropical system the Western Pacific has seen in years, since a major, memorable storm back in 2022. So why did it happen? It comes down to the ocean and the atmosphere handing this storm a perfect and frankly dangerous combination of ingredients. And once you understand these ingredients, you understand exactly why forecasters are so alarmed. A typhoon, at its core, is a heat engine. It runs on warm ocean water, sucking up heat and moisture from the sea surface and converting that energy into wind. And Dolphin has been moving over water that is extraordinarily warm. Sea surface temperatures around 32 degrees Celsius, which is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That is bathwater warm, well above the roughly 26-degree threshold that storms need just to survive. But surface warmth alone is not the whole story. And here is the crucial detail that separates an ordinary storm from a monster. That warm water extends to great depth. The region Dolphin is crossing has very high ocean heat content, meaning there's a massive reservoir of warmth stacked up well beneath the surface, not just a thin, warm skin on top. Why does that matter? Because a powerful storm churns the ocean violently, dredging up water from below. Only if that deeper water is cold, it acts like a brake, choking off the storm's fuel supply and weakening it. But when the warmth runs deep, as it does here, the storm just keeps pulling up more and more fuel, no matter how hard it churns. It is like a fire sitting on top of a bottomless supply of dry timber. There is nothing to slow it down. On top of that, the atmosphere surrounding Dolphin has been cooperating beautifully. From the storm's perspective, at least, forecasters have described its structure becoming increasingly complete and symmetrical, with the air flowing outward at the top of the storm, what meteorologists call outflow, developing well in every direction. Good outflow acts like an exhaust system, efficiently venting air away from the top of the storm so it can keep drawing more air in at the bottom and spinning it up faster and faster. When a storm has strong, unobstructed outflow in all directions, it is free to intensify at its maximum potential. And just as importantly, there has been very little wind shear. Those disruptive winds high in the atmosphere that can tilt a storm over and tear it apart. With low shear, warm deep water, and great outflow all at once, the door was wide open for Dolphin to reach its full, terrifying potential. And there is one more telltale sign that Dolphin has reached truly elite status, one that forecasters watch for specifically. The storm completed something called an eyewall replacement cycle and then continued to strengthen afterward. Let me explain what that is, because it is fascinating. In the most intense storms, the eyewall, the ring of ferocious thunderstorms surrounding the calm eye, can sometimes get choked up by a new, larger ring of storms forming around it. During this cycle, the storm often temporarily weakens a bit and grows wider. But once the new outer eye wall takes over and contracts, a storm in a favorable environment can re-intensify, sometimes to an even higher peak. Dolphin appears to have gone through exactly this process and come out the other side stronger, with satellite images showing its eye becoming clearer, rounder, and more sharply defined. A clean, symmetric eye staring back at you from a satellite image is the unmistakable signature of a powerful, well-organized, mature cyclone operating near the top of its game. When forecasters see that, they know they are looking at the real thing. Now let's talk about the records, because this is where Dolphin's story crosses from dangerous storm into potentially historic event. If Dolphin reaches the peak intensity that forecasters are projecting, it stands to break several records at once. First, as I mentioned, it would likely surpass the other powerful typhoons from earlier this season to become the strongest storm on the entire planet in 2026. The year's heavyweight champion, if you will. But it goes deeper than that. Forecasters have noted that Dolphin could rank among the strongest July tropical cyclones of the entire 21st century, putting it in the same conversation as a legendary record-setting super typhoon from 2016. And in the most striking comparison of all, some assessments suggest Dolphin could even approach the intensity of the strongest July typhoon ever reliably recorded. Oh, a monster storm that dates all the way back to 1956. Let that sink in for a moment. We may be watching, in real time, a storm that rivals nearly 70 years of July record keeping. That is the kind of event that meteorologists study and reference for years, even decades afterward. It is genuinely rare to witness a storm operating in this league. So the natural question, the one that actually matters most to the people in the region, is where is it going? And here's where I have to be very careful and completely honest with you, because this is the point where confirmed fact ends and forecasting begins, and I refuse to blur that line the way some coverage does. Right now, Dolphin is over open water, and that is genuinely good news, because it means no one is being directly struck at this moment. But the storm is absolutely not going to sit still. The current track guidance and the major forecast models, including the main American and European models and their ensembles, are steering Dolphin generally west-northwest. and the projected path points it toward Japan's southwestern islands. In the nearer term, that includes the remote Ogasawara and Iwo Islands, which sit well to the south of the Japanese mainland. And looking further ahead, the model ensembles have raised the real possibility that Okinawa, or parts of southwest Japan, could come into play sometime in the middle to latter part of next week. There is even a longer-range projection from one regional forecaster suggesting Dolphin could make landfall in Japan around the 7th of August, potentially bringing very heavy rain to areas including Kumamoto and Fukuoka. But, and I cannot stress this enough, I want to be absolutely straight with you about that specific projection. A landfall forecast that far out is highly uncertain. We are talking about a week or more into the future, and at that range, even small changes in the atmospheric steering patterns can shift a storm's eventual path by hundreds of miles in either direction. So please, do not take a specific date or a specific city as a locked-in certainty. It is one plausible scenario among several, and it will change. Anyone who tells you they know exactly where and when this storm will hit this far out is not being honest with you. What we can say with far more confidence is the direction of the threat. Dolphin is a powerful storm currently being steered toward the broader Japanese island region, and that means Japan, especially its southern and southwestern islands, needs to be watching this situation very closely over the coming days as the forecast sharpens. A couple of other important things worth knowing. Dolphin is not currently forecast to move into what is called the Philippine Area of Responsibility, so it is not expected to directly strike the Philippines. However, forecasters have noted that a storm this large and this powerful can enhance the broader seasonal monsoon flow across the region, and that could crank up rainfall across parts of the Philippines next week, even without any direct hit. It is a good reminder that these enormous systems influence the weather far, far beyond their own immediate path. Their reach extends over thousands of miles, and in Dolphin's wake, forecasters are already keeping an eye on the possibility of additional areas of low pressure developing behind it, one of which could eventually track westward into the South China Sea. In other words, Dolphin may be the undisputed headliner right now, but it might not be the only act in this stretch of what has been an exceptionally busy typhoon season. Let me put this into that bigger context for a moment because it genuinely matters to understanding what we are seeing. Dolphin is the third super typhoon of the 2026 Western Pacific season, and this season has been running unusually active and unusually intense. Earlier in the year, the same part of the world was battered by other top-tier typhoons, including storms that slammed into U.S., territories like Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands at Category 5 strength, causing real damage and forcing those island communities to rebuild not once, but repeatedly. And forecasters have connected this hyperactivity, at least in part, to the powerful El Niño currently influencing the global climate. El Niño, the warming of the central and eastern Pacific, tends to supercharge the Western Pacific typhoon season by shifting where storms form and giving them more warm, open ocean to develop and intensify over before they ever reach land. That extra runway over deep, warm water is exactly the kind of environment that allows a storm like Dolphin to go through explosive, rapid intensification. So Dolphin is not some random, isolated freak event. It is the latest and possibly the most extreme chapter in a season that has been producing monster storms one after another. And here's the sobering part. The traditional peak of the Western Pacific typhoon season is still ahead of us, typically arriving in the late summer and early fall. Dolphin may not be the last giant we talk about this year. So what should you actually take away from all of this? Here is the honest, practical read on the situation as it stands right now. If you are in Japan, and particularly if you are in the southwestern islands, the Ogasawara and Iwo Island region, Okinawa, or southwest Japan, this is the storm to keep your eyes on this week. You do not need to panic today. The storm is still days away, and its exact path is still being worked out by the forecasters. But now is precisely the time to start paying close attention. Now is the time to know where you would find your local emergency information and evacuation guidance to make sure you have a plan and to be ready to act quickly if the forecast firms up and Dolphin turns toward your area. Preparation is easiest and calmest when it is done days ahead, in the quiet, rather than in a last-minute scramble. For everyone else in the broader region, including those in the Philippines watching for that enhanced monsoon rainfall, staying weather-aware over the next week is simply the smart move. And for the rest of us watching from around the world, the key thing to understand is this. The story of Dolphin right now is fundamentally a story of a monster storm over open ocean, and the single biggest open question is whether and where it eventually reaches land and how strong it still is when it gets there. Here is an important nuance that often gets lost. Powerful typhoons frequently fluctuate in intensity, and Dolphin will very likely weaken somewhat from its absolute peak before it ever approaches any populated area, as storms tend to do when they move over slightly cooler or less favorable waters, or when they undergo more of those eyewall cycles. So you may well see the category number come down over the coming days. But please, do not let a lower number lull you into thinking the danger has passed. Even a weakening super typhoon can be enormously destructive. And here is why. As these storms mature and age, they very often expand dramatically in physical size. The core winds might ease slightly, but the overall wind field, the storm surge, and the shield of torrential rain spread out over a much wider area, threatening far more people across a much broader stretch of coastline. A smaller category number at landfall would not mean the threat is over. In some ways, a large, sprawling storm can be more dangerous to more people than a tiny, intense one. And while we naturally fixate on the wind speed, because that is the number that defines the category, history tells us something important that everyone in a storm's path should hear. The wind is often not what kills the most people. In storm after storm, it is the water that does the greatest damage and takes the most lives. Storm surge, the wall of seawater that a powerful cyclone shoves ashore as it makes landfall, can inundate coastal communities in minutes, and it has historically been the single deadliest element of these systems. And close behind it is the rainfall. A massive, slow-moving typhoon can dump staggering amounts of rain, triggering catastrophic flooding and landslides far inland, sometimes hundreds of miles from where the eye actually comes ashore. We saw exactly this kind of inland, rain-driven tragedy from powerful Pacific storms earlier this very season. So if Dolphin does eventually approach land, the conversation can not only be about its wind category. The surge along the coast and the rain over the mountains will matter just as much, and possibly more. That is the full picture of what a storm like this can do, and it is why forecasters urge people never to judge the danger by a single number. Here is the honest bottom line on what we know at this hour. Super Typhoon Dolphin has rapidly, violently exploded into a Category 5, one of the most powerful storms on the planet this year. Eyewall, fueled by extraordinarily warm, deep ocean water and a near-perfect atmospheric setup that let it reach its full potential. It is forecast to strengthen even further, potentially into genuinely record-challenging territory, before it begins its long journey west-northwest toward the Japanese island region. Right now it is over open water and threatening no one directly. But the projected path and the sheer historic power of this storm mean the coming week is one to watch very carefully, especially for southern and southwestern Japan. The situation is developing hour by hour. The details will sharpen, the forecast will change, and that, more than anything, is exactly why staying informed matters so much with a storm like this one. I'm going to be tracking Dolphin every single step of the way, every intensity update, every shift in the forecast track, every new sign of where and when it might threaten land. If you want to follow along and stay ahead of it as we learn more, subscribe right now so you do not miss a single update. Because with a storm this powerful and this fast-moving, the forecast can genuinely change in a hurry, and being informed early is everything. Hit that like button to help this reach more people in the region who need to see it. Let's get this in front of as many people as possible. And drop a comment down below. Where are you watching from? And are you anywhere near this storm's potential path? Tell me your story. I read every one of them, and I will see you in the very next update. Stay safe out there, stay prepared, and stay tuned, because this one is far from over.